San Francisco to Tokyo, the European Commission is shaping the digital future, not just at home, but across the globe. Join us as we navigate the digital diplomacy of tomorrow, because everything we do is part of something bigger.
Good afternoon and welcome to this CNECT University session dedicated to digital global gateways and more specifically to how Europe can build a resilient and secure backbone network. I am Rachele Civitareale and I will be moderating this session. So to start, just a little background. This week we are in the middle of the CNECT University Autumn School dedicated to the EU's international digital strategy. This weekend, the CNECT University sessions in general are an initiative of DigiConnect and aim to update both the EU staff and the general public about the latest digital trends as well as the most important digital policies. Today, as I said, we will focus on resilience and secure backbone networks with specific presentations on the matter. Before we start, I will quickly introduce the speakers of the day. So today we'll be in presence of, sorry, it's not in the order of how they are displayed, but Franco Accordino, head of Unit B5 in DigiConnect, unit responsible for investment in high-capacity networks. I am also in that unit. Julien Bollati, program officer, financial instrument specialist in the same unit. Georgios Serentis, senior policy officer, again, in the same unit of DigiConnect. Miguel Gonzalez Sancho, head of Unit E1 of DigiConnect. This unit is responsible for future networks. And then we have Hervé Dupuis, head of Unit B1 at HADEA, the European Health and Digital Executive Agency. And finally, we'll have Alexandra Rotileanu, deputy head of Unit B5 of DigiConnect. So normally all of you are connected via Slido today. Know that you can ask your questions there and we will make sure to answer them at the end of the session. We will also make sure to make the recording available as of next week on the Digital EU channel on YouTube and the slides on the Futurium platform. Links will be added in the chat. Now, without further ado, I will give the floor to Mr. Franco Accordino for the introduction of today's session. Franco, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Raquel. I think the camera will focus on me. Here we are. Yes. So good afternoon, everyone. Today, we will focus on a very specific type of connectivity infrastructure, submarine cables, in particular on their security and their resilience, which we have been working quite a lot in the past few years. So submarine cables are extremely important infrastructures. They're critical for connecting large geographical routes, even transoceanic routes. They are present everywhere in our sea basins, connecting states, regions, but also connecting digital capacities. They are, of course, financially demanding infrastructures. Investments in these kind of infrastructures is normally dominated by the private sector. So most of the cables that are underwater nowadays are owned by private operators, including hyperscalers. Of course, there are areas of the world, in particular when connecting regions that are so-called market failure. Of course, it's important that the public is investing in these sections in order to ensure that everyone is participating, contributing, and benefiting from the digital transformation. So we have connectivity targets set for 2030. As you know, they are of a universal nature. So we say, when we say all population, all households in the Union be connected with the gigabit connectivity by 2030 means really literally all. It means that if we have regions of the Union that are very remote, we have to ensure that their access networks benefit are of this type of performance. But of course, it doesn't make any sense of having an access network being a gigabit capable. But then in the end, we have a backbone that is not up to the task of ensuring the connectivity end to end with the other side of the world, in particular with the Union territories, because that's the overall objective, to make sure that everyone has an appropriate level of performance for their connectivity, uplink, downlink, all around the Union. So they are really the nervous system of our internal market and the engines, I would say, of cohesion. So for this reason, in most of the cases, those kind of infrastructure, large scale, they are cross-border. Indeed, the legal base is really rooted into the Article 170 of the Treaty of the Functioning of the Union, of the European Union. And it's actually indeed true. Without this infrastructure, there would not be a good functioning of the single market. There would not be cohesion. For that reason, they become more and more critical, especially given the time we are witnessing nowadays, times of geopolitical tension. Obviously, these infrastructure become geostrategic, to say the least. Their disruption would severely damage the interest of member states and the union as a whole. For that reason, we need to protect them. For this reason, we have earlier this year, I think it was in February, that we issued a cable security action plan, which followed the recommendation on the security and resilience of submarine cables the year before. So we will hear a little bit more about that from Miguel, from the other colleagues as well. But essentially, protecting this infrastructure means investing in new technologies, for instance, in sensors, in the next generations of cable systems that are capable of transforming the cables themselves into large-scale geographical sensors that can act as a large monitoring infrastructure or sentinels for what happens underwater, in the underwater domain, which data can be crucial in protecting the cables themselves, so flagging if there is any suspicious activity underwater, but also to protect any other type of infrastructure that is underwater. So this is becoming extremely sensitive, as you can imagine. We invest a lot in cables, primarily with the Connecting Europe facility. We have run so far 4 calls. If we sum up all the investments done so far in the last 4 years, we go beyond 600 million euro. Those investments obviously try to compensate the investments, let's say, the lack of investment in certain particular regions made by the private sector, maybe because that particular infrastructure is too risky, or because simply there is no market for that. There is where, of course, the CEF comes into place, mitigating the risks, and of course, facilitating the co-investment by the private sector or by investors in general. So, of course, there will be more said on this by Julien, I expect, on this specific aspect of what does it mean investing in submarine cables, as well as Georgios will speak a little bit more and elaborate on the importance of and the opportunity linked to smart cables. So basically, things are already well ongoing. We are really proceeding at cruising speed with the CEF Digital. There will be more calls in the future. We will also try to cover also an important aspect, which is reinforcing the repair capacity in Europe, because we have seen that in the last period, we have observed a certain increase in certain specific areas, for instance, the Baltic, of incidents. And of course, irrespective of the intentionality or unintentionality of the incidents, it's our duty to intervene where, of course, to complement, of course, what the private sector capacities are already capable of doing today in a brilliant manner. But in case of systemic failures, systemic cuts of cables, which might unfortunately not be excluded in this period nowadays, well, it's exactly there that the emergency response approach has to be put in place to complement what it already exists in a full synergy. Of course, we are working and reflecting on that. So all of this happens, of course, now, and it has happened and it continues to happen. But also we look also a little bit at the future, how this specific niche sector is going to evolve. I mentioned the Trans-European network for telecommunications or digital. Of course, we will hear more about that from Alexander at the end. But otherwise, I really think this is going to be a very exciting session. We'll go deep dive on the just few elements I mentioned to you now in my short introduction. But I really look forward to a quite interesting session and also interactive one, because we are, of course, available to take questions between one and the other session. And sorry, I forget the last point. Of course, to make all of this happen, we need to implement it. And we implemented programs also thanks to our executive agency that is mostly responsible for launching and coordinating the various corporate proposals. We have Hervé also in the program. So with this, I thank for your attention, and I give the floor over to Rachele for the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Franco, for this very nice introduction to the topic, very useful for the rest of the session. So now we will move on to the first presentation of the day. As I said, it would be taken care of by Julien Borlatti, and it will tackle investment in submarine cables. Julien, the floor is yours. I just want to precise that after this session, we'll have a short Q&A if it is needed, okay? So you can ask your questions on Slido in the meantime. Julien, now the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rachele. Good afternoon, everybody. I wanted to start my intervention by describing what we're talking about when we say submarine cables. It's a network of over 550 active cables globally. They're spanning more than 1.4 million kilometers, and they ensure global communication by carrying over 95% of the whole internet traffic. The landscape and in general, the structure of the market has significantly changed lately. Most of the cable deployed during the dot-com boom, were owned by telecom operators serving mostly their own needs. However, the telecom liberalization has reduced this vertical integration, and operators are more and more commonly deciding to focus on providing telecom and internet services, and therefore separating the management of the network infrastructure. This made the open access network model more popular also for submarine cables. Driven by the explosive demand for cloud services, the role of hyperscalers like Google, Microsoft, and Amazon has shifted from being major customers of submarine cables to becoming dominant investors and builders. Their core business involves moving large volume of data globally between their data centers. And they use these submarine cables that are spread across the world. This means that their core business requirement really dictates the routes of the submarine cables and the location of the landing stations, mostly towards connecting data centers. This shift has reshaped the industry, with hyperscalers influencing cable design, landing station, and the overall market. The speed at which this happened is also remarkable. The first hyperscaler investing and not only leasing capacity was Google in 2010, when they entered a consortium to connect Japan and the US. Following few investment in submarine cables as part of consortia, in 2018, they started to invest in private cables. In the following year, in 2019, it's when we saw the first submarine cable from an hyperscaler connecting Europe, landing in Europe. Since then, when we count for all the new deployments that happened, we see that almost half of the market in terms of fiber length landing in the EU has been deployed by hyperscalers. And the trend is only expected to further increase. Next slide, please. Historically, the vast majority of submarine cables were deployed and operated under consortium model. as I've just mentioned before. In this model, the risk and the cost were shared by each member of the consortium with a co-ownership agreement. So each member which were typically telecom operators, they were coming with their own and independent business plan to decide if they wanted or not to invest in a given cable system. In return of covering a portion of the upfront capital cost, as well as the operation and maintenance, they were getting a share of the capacity of the system in proportion of the investment. On the opposite spectrum, we have private cables, where private submarine cables are commissioned and owned by a single company for its own use. There is, of course, a full range of intermediate options, and we have seen them becoming even more complex, with a structure where sometimes hyperscalers combine financing from and participation from investment funds, from public entities. But it's clear that this evolved, moving away from the traditional consortium is really driven by hyperscalers. And something that is also becoming more frequent is the involvement of the public sector and their participation in the deployment of new cables. This is usually done for strategic reasons and in terms of ensuring resilience of the system, or simply for sovereignty considerations. And it is done in different ways. It can take the forms of direct subsidies, as we're doing in Europe through the Connecting Europe facility, as it was mentioned just a few minutes ago by Franco, or sometimes through leasing capacity or other schemes. Next slides, please. Submarine cables are difficult to finance by nature. There are very significant upfront costs before the submarine is ready for service. The company that will carry out the project, which is usually an SPV, a special purpose vehicle, will need to finance the deployment costs, as well as the costs associated with the front haul and back haul infrastructure, as well as also all the staffing costs and all the operation. On average, between 55 and 60% of all costs, including the capital investment and the operational cost, are incurred before the cable is ready for service. This is really a big front loading of the cost. And another challenge is that the payback period is relatively long, with revenues that are spread over the designed life of this infrastructure, which is typically 25 years. To minimize these upfront funding requirements, but also to reduce the demand risk, the project promoters, they usually try to secure some pre-commitments from anchor tenants, so some early customers. And they do it in the forms of indivisible right of use, IRUs, which consist in a firm lease of capacity. It can be, for example, on one or several fiber pairs or fractions of the capacity for long period of time, typically in the range of 15 years, but then there are different arrangements possible from 10 to 20 or more ad hoc solutions. And to incentivize these early customers, project promoters usually give them in exchange significant price discounts. Securing a significant share of early customers, it's not only important for the project promoters to reduce their risk in terms of profitability, but it's often also a requirement that investors and private financiers ask to the project promoters. This is more and more common, in particular for getting banking loans. Nowadays, the capital investment for new cable system is likely beyond the reach of many traditional operators whose attention, as I've said before, is going more and more on focusing their existing infrastructure rather than leading new developments, because they're focusing more on the provision of services. The result is that even when hyperscalers, they take the lead and they provide the funding for new cable system, the number of companies that are both willing and able to purchase new fiber pairs keep reducing. This is also due to the fact that cable projects are long-term by nature, not only for their expected lifetime, but also because it takes a long time for them to be ready. It can take 10 years from inception to full functionality, and all the returns and benefits are unable to materialize until the project is really close to its realization. This makes also any delays and discrepancy of the timeline, especially when the consortium model is also involved, is used, meaning that there are many stakeholders participating and the cable is connecting several jurisdictions, therefore making the permitting process with multiple governments even more complex. All this level of complexity can make even projects that are potentially viable, possibly impossible to deliver. Next slide, please. The global submarine cable market is projected to continue growing. The main drivers are the increasing demand for internet bandwidth and the need for resilient and diverse connectivity. Immersive and capacity-hungry applications such as AI are fueling data growth. And the hyperscalers and cloud computing providers, they are seeing significant growth. However, the rate of such growth is very uncertain. This is an issue for all providers on the market, as it makes projections of scale and capacity increasingly unstable the further out they try to predict. This makes business plans that stretch over 20-25 years very difficult, meaning that if the project will eventually be profitable, it's something very risky to know in advance. In addition, the business model for another risk is that business models for small operators are largely driven by selling fiber pairs to hyperscalers. Hyperscalers, however, are well aware of their own purchasing power, and negotiations on the pricing is very tough. There are also technological development that makes the profitability an issue for submarine cable projects. As the number of fiber pairs in a cable has a relatively small impact on the total cost, this is because most of the costs are driven by the maritime operations for the actual lay above the sea. Modern cables with a higher number of fiber pairs can offer much lower prices than previous generation cables. So there is a tough competition on the level of prices. And moreover, the lower costs that are possible on the terrestrial markets are sometimes even used to skew subsea prices even lower. So there is a very high competition that is driving down the prices and making projects, again, challenging from a profitability point of view. What can be done at the European level to ensure at least some level of stability in terms of and the foreseeability of the revenues is to try to help securing some anchor clients. And we have seen some examples of how, for instance, GÉANT, the organization that interconnects all Europe's national research and education networks, can be used as an anchor client for the rollout of new cable systems. And this is something that can be used, maybe also using some other anchor clients, and to ensure that there is still an attractive level of profitability for European deployments. Next slide, please. The issue is that there are a number of cable operators in Europe that, and everywhere in the world actually, that own cables reaching their end of life. Without new deployments that would replace this system, such European companies could consequently drop out of the market. Unfortunately for these companies, would they want to try to re-enter in a later stage? This would be extremely difficult, as the barriers to do so are very high. And traditionally, operators, mostly focusing on services, once they would lose their competence that they currently have, it would be really difficult for them to gather it again. The consequence of losing European carriers and providers is that Europe would essentially lose its ability to operate with autonomy regarding subsea cables. Hyperscalers, they still need European companies to drive smaller cable initiatives, for example, localized for the provision of localized services or shore and landings. And this is crucial. It's crucial that European operators, they specialize in specific products and services that hyperscalers are not necessarily interested in, but which are complementary. For example, serving isolated destination or smaller scales deployment. Maintaining the know-how and the operational capacity is fundamental. And this is also something that in Europe, we are really trying to address, including with the action plan on submarine cables. And we are trying also with the work of the expert group that will be mentioned just in a few minutes. We've been working on identifying cable projects of European interest that could be a way also to allow European operators to still be present on the market, potentially with the support of CEF. And lastly, I think it's also important that the investment is going into research and innovation, and in general in the whole telecom submarine value chain, to make sure that we still have champions in Europe that can provide added value for this sector. That's it from my side, Akele.
Thank you very much, Julien, for this nice presentation. Now, without further ado, we will move on to our next presentation from Yorgos Tselentis. He will present smart cables as now indicated in the slides. Yorgos, the floor is yours.
Hello, good afternoon. I hope you can hear me and see me well. I am going to present you a topic which is referring to the smart cables. So next slide to give you the overview of this presentation. I'm going to tell you about the technology, the rationale, and the benefits of making the cable smart. How Europe, and in particular our program, the Connecting European Facility, is supporting the smart cable technologies. Some takeaways that we had from our community conference that took place on the 7th of October 2025, and how the new policy priorities are affecting this topic in particular, or how this topic can help about the security and resilience. So next slide, please. A little bit about what we're talking about is submarine cables are laying in the bottom of the sea in some very harsh conditions. The pressure is very high. Every 10 meters, you have 1 atmosphere that is increasing of pressure. You have salt. And these cables that are not bigger than the hose pipe that you find in your garden a little bit bigger, transfer terabytes of information and connect actually the continents and also the islands and other remote areas. There's a misconception that what we have as connectivities mainly for long distances is happening through satellites, but more than 95 or even more is happening through submarine cables. So this is a critical infrastructure because internet is a critical infrastructure. And they are having, potentially there are many causes of incidents for faults, mainly due to the human activity, like fishing trawlers having their gear scraping the bottom of the ocean and then severing cables or anchoring of other ships. But at the same time, you have also natural incidents like earthquakes or volcanic eruptions that can provide faults. So next slide, please. I will talk a little bit about the technology. So by smart cable, we are trying here to implement some technologies, either by attaching sensors in those cables. So these sensors are typically housed in like the repeaters. So the repeaters are the casings that are amplifying the laser beam, so it can transfer the signal to long distances. But then we have also we can put sensors in some of these housings, and these sensors can be whatever can sense, for example, the accelerometers for movement, or can be hydrophones. And this is one technology to make the cable smart. By doing this, we can have applications that can be where we can be aware of what is happening in the vicinity of those cables, which is an area that usually is unexplored. We are talking about kilometers in the bottom of the ocean, and we know that 70% of the surface of the Earth is covered by water. So we have a unique opportunity to have early warning systems in case of something happens, an earthquake or even an underwater volcano erupts. We can also attach those sensing capabilities next to other critical infrastructures like gas pipes, for example, and we can be aware of if something is happening in the vicinity. But this is not, this technology is not limited to the underwater infrastructure. You can monitor traffic in terrestrial cables, in railways. You can check borders. You can have also any type that is monitoring the situation which is next to the cable. So, for example, anything that has to do with environmental monitoring, the currents, etc., etc. So, next slide. I will talk a little bit about the other type of technology, which is not to place the sensors on the cable, but to use the cable as a sensor. How does this work? The laser beam that is traveling through the cable, when there is a movement of the laser beam of the cable, there is a physical phenomenon which is called Rayleigh backscattering that gives back the origin parts of the signal. If you manage to capture this by what we call interrogators, then you can have a signal, a fingerprint of something that happened, and we have very good, we can make an analysis, and we use also artificial intelligence about this, of this signal, and understand from the fingerprint what happened. This type of adding smart capabilities to the cables doesn't involve any extra costs if it is to put sensors, which need also powering and communication, which is easy. But at the same time, you can have the possibility to detect what is happening very close to the infrastructure with very low cost, relatively low cost. Just put the interrogators at the edge of the cable, and then you can analyze the fingerprints of what is happening there. Next slide, please. So, as I said, with the smart cables, we can have this is a slide from the presentation in our event from Bruce Ho, from the Joint Task Force on the Smart Cables. We can observe the ocean about earthquakes and tsunamis, and actually this is one of the few opportunities we have. Either we can put buoys that are observing what is happening in the ocean, regarding the currents, regarding the temperature of the water, and we can have also a very good early warning system in case of eruptions, volcanic eruptions or tsunamis that are created. Next slide, please. Similarly, this is another slide from the same event where we had Jose Pares from the Joint Task Force that was presenting that we could use in a particular application of the Atlantic CAM, the infrastructure. Sorry. The infrastructure that is deployed in the Azores, where we can use sensors for either having an early warning system, also about fishing boats that are approaching the infrastructure, but also for the environmental observation and the early warning system that I mentioned before. Next slide, please. And that's a third example that was presented there. And I wanted to show you how the distributed acoustic sensing is used, about the technology. So this is a terrestrial cable that you can see on the screen that is laid on the road. And if you can press, please, Raquel, the video, you will see how on the left, right, you have a car which is approaching, and you can see the signature in the bottom of the screen. Then from this car, somebody goes out and walking, and you can see the distinct footsteps. And when it takes the gun and shoots, you can see that this is captured by a bang, which is a signal also on the bottom right. So all this is happening without adding any sensor to the cable, and this is driven by the small micro movements that are happening in the fiber that is buried inside the ground. So that's the example of the technology. This was given by AP Sensing, Clemens Paul, CEO and Managing Director of AP Sensing. Next slide, please. So what we do with Connecting European Facility to support the use of smart cables? So far, we entered in the call that we have an explicit mentioning that we encourage the deployment. And actually, we give to a certain amount eligible costs to transform the deployment of cable systems that are used for connectivity to become smart. More than 15 Connecting European Facility projects so far have included or are considering to include this type of technologies. And they use both types of technology, either to attach sensors or to use technology like the DAS, distributed acoustic sensing, that I showed you before. And the application is exactly the ones that I presented before. They vary for protection from the infrastructure itself and environmental monitoring. Next slide, please. So now we are in a position where we are having policy priorities that are not only changing, but are get on the focus. Connecting European facilities about connectivity, providing connectivity, but at the same time, the security of this infrastructure and the resilience of this infrastructure is becoming a prime concern. So here we can see possibilities, and I will say something about the funding opportunities in the future, about how to use the smart technologies for that. One of the problems that we have is that for the operators, the ones who are deploying the connectivity through the cable systems, usually there is no evident business model how and who should benefit from this data and who should pay for that. So the obvious path would be that if we are having a public good that is served there, that also there is a public-private partnership in this domain. This type of data that are we can get from smart cables are quite sensitive, particularly for defense purposes. So we need to know first who is going to operate the smart cables, who is going to collect the data, how the data are going to be used. These are not easy questions to be answered. There is also jurisdictional complexity because as long as you move, and I'm talking here about the submarine cables, from the moment you move away from the territorial waters and you go to the open seas, there are difficult jurisdictional and complex questions to be answered. And I think, I don't know if it's the last slide. Yes, it's the last slide. I'll pass the floor to Rachele.
Yes, thank you very much. Before we move on to the next session, I want to just ask a question to Julien. It was asked in the chat, so I grabbed the occasion. Julien, it was asked, are Latin American countries working more with us or with the US for connectivity of cables? Would you mind answering this question?
Yes, sure. I would say that there are for sure more cables connecting Latin America to the United States than to Europe, where there is the Bella Isla link cable. However, if we go beyond just the number of connections and we look at working with Latin America, I think that there are a number of cable operators which are quite active there. I think, for example, about Sparkle, which is quite active. And I don't have the statistics, but I think that ASN, Alcatel Submarine Network, is quite an active supplier also in that area, and they could even have the majority of the cables. But yes, this is on top of my head what I could say about Latin America.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. There's another, not really a question, more a reaction, but maybe someone here in the team can say a few words. So with the EU moving now more towards defense, is the priority going to change? Can we answer this one? I don't know, one of you wants to take the floor?
Yeah, I think well, it has been said before that cables have been acknowledged as a key strategic asset, a critical infrastructure, and I will touch upon it on my presentation. This has become center stage in the political, let's say, priorities, and there's in the landscape that we're living in of geopolitical uncertainty and hybrid warfare and the like, cables, submarine cables are featuring very prominently in that. So defending this critical infrastructure is certainly part of a comprehensive approach to European defense.
Thank you very much, Miguel. And with this, we will follow with your own presentation, sorry. So it's about security and resilience of submarine cable infrastructures, and we will take more questions after it. So the floor is yours now, Miguel.
Okay, thank you. How do I do to operate the slides, or somebody will do it?
I will do it, yes.
Okay, thank you. So I will, in my presentation, I will address the some of the EU policy on security and resilience of submarine cables, and just replying to the last question. This has become very prominently in the Commission policy agenda recently. A lot has been said about cables already, notably about their relevance for digital communications. The majority actually of the traffic, intercontinental traffic, data traffic, runs through submarine cables. This is where we get, the internet is really, those are the arteries of the global communications today. So an absolutely critical infrastructure. That slide shows it's just a snapshot of the routes that are landing in Europe from all over the world. As I said, a significant share of data communications comes through those data cables. I just mentioned before in reply to the question that we're living in a world of geopolitical uncertainty. There's been in particular high prominent incidents that have taken place in the last months affecting submarine cables and actually other infrastructure, other submarine infrastructure like oil pipes and so. And that has grabbed the news with the realization indeed that this is a very critical infrastructure. As I said, incidents happen, and many of them, the majority actually, they are not provoked, but there's uncertainty of not knowing who is behind what happened. So that is a very fertile ground for hybrid warfare. This submarine cable. So it was next slide. It was mentioned before, read a couple of times. Against that background of submarine cables are critical infrastructure, there are some risks that we need to address. The Commission came up with an action plan on cable security this year in February. That was a communication from the Commission and the High AAS, High Representative of External Relations. This communication covers both power, so for electricity, and data cables for communication. So, and it's connect with chef de file for, of course, for the telecommunication cables. Basically, the communication, what it did was to kind of summarize a bit some of the ongoing activities, put a framework, and also make some announcements about a future action. This comes in that structure. So following the so-called full resilience cycle, security, resilience and security. So preventing the risks, the threats, detecting when something's happening, responding and recovering to the incidents, to the problems, and then deterring the malicious actors from acting basically. So there's a series of actions that come under each one of those pillars. I will focus in my presentation in the prevention, anticipation, because there's been some work going on, from the Commission side that I will present. So some recent developments. So it's that circled part that I will address in particular. Next slide. Even before the action plan of February, there was a recommendation last year, also in February, but of 2024, a Commission recommendation on secure and resilient submarine cable infrastructures. So this is about the cable themselves and all the related, all the infrastructure actually, also in the landing aspects, the landing part of the infrastructure. And okay, a recommendation mainly to member states for, to take some measures and some practices, and also proposing to set up a sort of, let's say, light governance framework at European level to discuss with national authorities about security and resilience of submarine cables. So that was adopted last year, and actually the action plan took over basically the recommendations from that Commission recommendation. The actions in there, the main actions were confirmed in the action plan this year, together with other actions. Next slide. So I will not go into the detail. Basically, in order to implement that recommendation from the Commission, an expert group, the Commission created an expert group, but actually who is in the expert group is national authorities. It's representatives from national authorities that are responsible for security and resilience of submarine cables. This might concern different authorities at national level, but we contacted member states and we told them, listen, send someone or a couple of persons who can coordinate at national level and who can come here to Brussels from time to time and to discuss together about the security and resilience of submarine cables. Next slide. Well, there's just to say, this is slide, perhaps it comes a bit early, but this is a bit of a summary of the value chain of submarine cables, giving a background. Some things have been said about this before, but just to say that there's a few operators, important operators in the world from a few parts of the world that concentrate most of the capacity when it comes to lines, so putting down submarine cables and repairing and so forth. Europe has some capacity in that space, but the landscape it's changing very fast, as it has been said by the colleagues before. So just to say that beyond the short-term incidents and risk a cable is cut or disrupted, there's an economic security background to this discussion, considering that, as I said, we're talking about a critical infrastructure on which digital communications, the internet depends. So that means the whole of society. Next slide. And what is it that we've done? So some of the actions in the recommendation and then confirmed in the action plan were to map the situation of submarine cable infrastructures. So and what was done in the different member states about their security and resilience, and what the routes, where there would be problems, and so to have an overview. That was one of the actions, and then to come up with an assessment, a joint, shared assessment from all member states and the Commission about what are the risks. What are the risks that submarine cables, data cables, because these are the ones that we are addressing. Some of the risks are common to other types of submarine infrastructure. What are the risks that are faced? Then from there, come up with recommended measures to mitigate those risks. So that part of the work has been covered, and I will present it very briefly. There was a report that was adopted by this group of national authorities together with the Commission on the 23rd of October, so very recent, with mapping the situation and also the administrative and legal kind of framework, identifying the risks, and I will explain, and some risk scenarios. So this part of work has been done, and what will follow then later is to develop a toolbox of mitigating measures. So that's foreseen by the end of this year in the action plan. And important mitigating measure, let's say, it's funding. Okay, funding, CEF funding has been going for some time. So The idea there, what has been said, is that this group should identify the priorities, so-called cables of common European interest. So, to have more redundancy, to support in priority some routes. So that will also come in the next deliverable foreseen by the end of this year. So very quickly to present what this group has done, and you can check, as I said, it's all public information, this report and the annex, which has lots of information there. So basically, what the member states, together with the Commission, have agreed on an assessment of the risks that submarine cables are facing. So in several categories, so it's identify the threats that exist, the vulnerabilities, the dependencies, and then from there come up with risk scenarios, i.e. Summarizing what are the main situations that are putting cables in risk. Next slide. So I will not go by no means into detail, but just to give you an idea, the classification is that, in terms of threats and vulnerabilities, there's some that are intentional and some others that are not. So intentional, man-made. And the man-made can be physical or can be cyber. So physical, very simply, can be, sabotage, cutting a cable intentionally to create damage and disruption. Cyber attacks to any kind of data, let's say, digital communication infrastructure. And then identification also what are the physical vulnerabilities and the cyber vulnerabilities that might exist. So there's a list of such threats and vulnerabilities identified in different categories. I think what is powerful about this is that the fact that all member states have agreed by consensus, this is the picture, the risk picture that we think must be addressed. Next slide. And then you have the vulnerabilities and threats that are unintentional, be it human, typical anchor that drags and breaks cables. So that happens more often than not. Natural things that happen, the sea is moving all the time. You can have earthquakes or just all sorts of disruptions. Next slide. And also next to threats and vulnerabilities, there's a common assessment agreed upon in terms of dependencies. Dependencies on the supply chain, like such as the slide that I presented before, depending on a few suppliers that are out there for key components, so-called geographical dependencies. There are some, some countries that can for one reason or the other, they can create some tension. It might be just things which are intentional, like Russian fleet. I mean, there's a lot of concern about it. Or the UK is nothing intentional, but just the fact that, many cables are coming to Europe via the UK. So that's an issue that might render some parts of Europe dependent from that country. And then, dependencies of other nature, technical, administrative, and so. So next slide. With that, this group of member states, together with the Commission, came up with seven key risk scenarios. Grouping different threats and the vulnerabilities and dependencies. First risk scenario would be coordinated physical sabotage, so really deliberate attack. Sabotage, but not on the cable, but on the landing part, on the land part. Sorry. Another would be power outage. No electricity, so disruption. Maintenance, the maintenance of cables. The cables need to be repaired. So if there's insufficient capacity for that or not quick enough, that would be a problem. A cable is damaged. So there's no internet, as it happened actually in some countries in Africa. They had no internet for some time because the cables were not repaired quickly. Disruptions in the supply chain. There are some components like the fibers in the cables. There's just a few producers in the world. I mean, there's no components arriving, that might be disruptive. Unintentional cable damage. That's a risk scenario that happens most often than not. As I said, these anchors, these vessels that they accidentally break. So that's another risk scenario. Or natural events. Natural events, as I said, just things can happen and the cable is broken. Next slide. So next to that, the group worked on that some stress tests, so kind of approach based on risk scenarios. How can these risks be tested? And actually, we had recently a call for proposals under the Digital Europe program to support this work, so that relevant entities from member states, private or public, could stress test, as it happens in other area like banking or what have you, the resilience of the cables, testing the scenarios that have been agreed upon. I'm almost done. Next slide. So as I said, now we have, let's say, a common basis of what are the main risks that are faced by submarine cable infrastructure that has been agreed with all member states at an informal level with a group, that ad hoc group, not in council. So, but still, I mean, it has this political, solidity that has been discussed and agreed by all of them. So that's the common risk basis, the risk scenarios that have been agreed. So these are the important things to address. And under each one of them, there's a series of threats, of vulnerabilities, of dependencies to be addressed. The group continues working. We are continue working with them. And as I said before, the next step will be come up with a second report about the measures that are recommended to address the different risks scenarios identified. As I said before, the list of cable projects of European interest. To inform the next calls of CEF digital cables, to say, listen, pay attention to this particular route, so this particular, let's say, issue regarding submarine cables, because we think it would contribute to reinforce overall resilience of Europe if that particular route or that particular issue or repair capacity or what have you would be reinforced. With that, the Commission will take that into account, and that will be in due time informing and reflected in the next calls, CEF calls for on submarine cables. So that's it. That's I stop my presentation there. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you very much, Miguel. I just want to ask the question that was asked in the chat. I'm not sure we can answer it, but still shooting it for you. So during last year in the EU, were there more intentional or unintentional damages? Can we answer this question?
I think I can answer. I think there's consensus that there's more non-intentional incidents. I mean, there's like 200 a year, something like that, and the majority are non-intentional. So things happen, as I said. The typical thing is the anchor that is dragged and cuts a cable. But the problem is that very often it's not certain whether it was intentional or not. And this is where we enter into the hybrid warfare situation. It's not clear, and those that do it intentionally, do everything to just mask their actions. So it's very unsettling. And you cannot know, and attribution is quite problematic. Now we enter into territory of scenario planning. Even what if there was an orchestrated attempt, to really disrupt our communication infrastructure, which means that it's not because today most of them are not, that there couldn't be a serious problem in the future. So it's important to plan for that scenario where there will be an orchestrated, let's say, disruption. Okay,
makes sense. So more unintentional, let's say, is the answer. Great. So now we will move on to the next presentation. We have here Hervé Dupuis from ADEA Online. Hervé, can you maybe switch on your camera? Can we verify that you're here and your mic?
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I leave the floor to you. Thank you, Hervé.
Thank you. Thank you all. Good afternoon. My part of the presentations is about the processes, which is how do we turn those various activities into actual projects funded by the CEF digital program. So as you can see from this first slide, CEF digital program is implemented by ADEA. So that's the team I lead in the executive agency. As you can see, it is not a big program in terms of budget for the agency, but certainly a very critical one, as previous speakers have rightly explained. And it is jointly implemented as far as the energy and transport sectors are concerned by another executive agency, CNECT. So next slide. So in terms of process, those of you who are familiar with the typical implementation steps will be finding it very similar to what they have experienced. So we start obviously from the work program, which is a multi-annual work program as far as our program is concerned. So it can be amended, but certainly it gives us the possibility to use some financial flexibility, such as multi-annual commitments. Then obviously, as soon as we have a new program amended, we have the drafting of the call text, the opening and closing of the calls themselves published on our website. And then we enter into the well-established procedure of implementation, of evaluation, which is framed according to the financial regulation in various key performance indicators. So these appear in those acronyms. TTG is the time to grant. So we have in total 9 months to complete that step. And within that framework, we have 6 months for the time to inform, TTI, and the time to sign, which is the period covered by the grant agreement preparation, the so-called GAP. As you can see, and I will drill down in some of those steps in a moment, the most important part as far as our program is concerned is to go through the evaluation process, taking due account of the sensitivity around those particular projects. So admissibility and eligibility checks are quite common to any program. Then we run the external evaluation, as you can see, but it is completed by an internal evaluation, which is quite specific to this particular program, and I will explain this in more details in a moment. And then we have the classical information to applicants, program committee consultation, the CEF program committee of representatives of member states, commission award decision, signature of the grant agreements at the agency level, and the pre-financing, which is also carried out by the executive agency on behalf of DG Connect. So let's move to some of the next slides. So here, this is a reminder of the complexity somehow that we have put in place for our applicants to make sure that we have your full information at the time of evaluating those projects, those proposals for projects at that point in time. I will not go obviously one by one, but you will recognize the various parts of application forms, detailed work packages and budget tables, Gantt charts. All these are very classical elements. What we also add to the CEF digital program is letters of support by the concerned member states. So that means somehow the member states have also already a commitment to accompany those various project promoters, and this is an important element for us to make sure that the policy and the political endorsement almost of the national governments concerned is also right from the outset embedded into the procedure. Then we have the ownership and control declaration, security guarantees, and member states approvals. I will say a few words about that. Our calls are so-called restricted calls in the sense that we have further conditions on ownership and control of the applicants, which have to be EU controlled, so it's not enough for applicants to be established in the EU. They have also to have a shareholder structure and governance rules, which have to be EU controlled by legal entities which are in the EU, or nationals who are also of EU nationality. So there are some possibilities to derogate from this basic rule, but this is a very important one, which is governed by central guidance on restricted calls. Then we have also security compliance declaration referring to the 5G toolbox, which sets a number of methodological requirements in terms of security, cybersecurity compliance. Then we can move to the next slide. So the step by step, those are also some of those are certainly familiar to many of you online. The preliminary check, so this is admissibility and eligibility. So this is carried out by the HADEA staff as such. And then we hire the external experts, so independent experts from industry, academics, any type of background, with a variety, obviously, in terms of origins and frequency of being hired. So we keep and renew the balance of the evaluators that we set in the pool and eventually contract. And they are asked to run an individual assessment of each and every proposal by groups of 3. And those experts then meet in consensus meetings, which nowadays take more often place online. And we moderate and make sure that those consensus meetings are run in a time-efficient manner to produce effects on the outcome of the individual evaluation of each and every proposal. I should add to this that in parallel, we also hire security experts who also work individually on each and every proposal and make recommendations, which are also taken on board in this process of external evaluation. Now, then we move to the so-called internal evaluation, which is also made of consensus meetings, which are involving colleagues from DG CONNECT mostly. So the units which have taken the floor are at the very center of this process, but most recently we have also enlarged the composition of those consensus meetings to colleagues from other DGs who have a stake in such funding of submarine cable infrastructure. So, for instance, that includes DG INTPA, that includes DG MENA, DG NEST, the former DG NIR, and DG Regio as well. So these colleagues are indeed involved as a result of this process very early in the process, so that they can review the outcome of the external evaluation and give an input, let's say, taking more into account the policy impact of such or such parameters, which I will present in a second. The outcome of this is a recommended draft, which is taking us to the next step. Before we move to the next slide, a word also on the checks which start already at that point in time on financial capacity, ownership control, as I mentioned. In some cases, security scrutiny, not the case for these submarine cables, but certainly this is part of the parallel work which is also carried out. Next step. Still on the award criteria, here you have listed the 5 parameters, the 5 criteria which are used throughout the evaluation process by all experts, be they external or internal experts. So I will not read one by one, but as you can see, there is a complex combination of parameters and sub-parameters for each and every of the 5 criteria: priority and urgency, maturity of the proposal, catalytic effect of such proposal, its potential impact, and the quality overall of the proposal. For us, it is obviously very important that each and every of those priority meet the passing mark of at least 3 points out of 5, and that will take us to the ranking list, which is eventually submitted to our authorities. Next slide, please. So indeed, the next step is the selection committee, or the evaluation committee, as it's called sometimes. This is, as far as the Safe Digital program is concerned, the ICT directors of DG CONNECT. The HADEA is sitting as observer in those meetings, where the final list of ranked proposals is presented for endorsement. And once it is done, this goes into first cabinet approval to launch the inter-service consultation. Then in the inter-service consultation, obviously now we have responses from the same DGs I mentioned earlier, which have also stakes in the submarine cable financing, as well as potentially central services for this matter. And the consultation of the SEF program committee. So all member states are obviously consulted as part of the comitology procedure. And eventually the information to applicants and the adoption by the college of the award decision, the final commission selection decision. In parallel, we launched the grant agreement preparation for the signature of the grant agreement. Next slide, please. So indeed, the results of these evaluations take us to 3 categories of proposals. So the first is the happy path, those proposals which have reached the threshold to be funded and of quality. Those are invited to grant agreement preparation. So we are therefore indeed in this phase, as far as the call for is concerned of this program. We have a second list, which is the list of the rejected proposals. So obviously, if their quality was not sufficient on any of the 5 criteria, then they are rejected for funding. And in between, we have the so-called reserve list, those who are of sufficient quality to be selected, but below the funding line, the funding availability. And for those projects on the reserve list, there is, let's say, a second chance, which is foreseen in the CEF regulation, which allows them to have some sort of fast-track evaluation. If the cohesion funds, the programs of the structural funds, can fund them, there is this potential fast without thorough evaluation, because they have already been evaluated. So fast track procedure, which is a possibility, it receives the label of seal of excellence for the projects in the reserve list. This is a concept which is maybe familiar to some of you, as far as the research of Horizon Europe is concerned. Then next slide. I wanted to also draw your attention on some of the specific assessments that we run during the grant agreement preparation, the GAP. This is a joint effort together with REA, the executive agency on research, which has this special department, the Central Verification Service, which carries out 2 types of very important assessments on our behalf. So the financial capacity assessments of each and every entity which has been selected for coordinating those projects and running those projects. So this is indeed a thorough assessment, which is ensuring sound financial management, and we decide upon the results of this assessment whether we do pay the pre-financing or not, or take additional measures of reinforced monitoring or else. Then we have, as I mentioned earlier, the ownership and control assessment, which is linked to a thorough assessment whether the shareholder structure of the entities and the governance rules for those entities guarantee that they are EU controlled. And in most recent times, we have opened the possibility through the amendments of the work program that in case such entities are not EU controlled, but they are established in the EU, they may provide an additional document of security guarantee. And such security guarantee have to be approved by the member states in order to be validated. And that allows for possibility for such scenarios to still stay with us and remain in our portfolio of projects. Next slide, please. Well, before I finish, I might want to share with you, I guess I can share, I can't share content. Okay. Wanted to show you the map of our projects funded so far. Not a problem. Maybe we will add it in the link, at least in the final version of the slides. But thank you for your attention. And I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
Yes, thank you very much, Hervé. We received one question for you, but maybe it could also be answered by someone else. So are the grants processes being assessed in the omnibus packages for simplification?
Shall I take it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so we are very well aware that simplification is very high on the agenda of the Commission, and we want to be part of it. So at the moment we don't have, for instance, we're not affected, let's say, as far as the legislation is concerned, by these simplification steps of merging or dropping some legal basis. But at working level, as an executive agency, we're keen to always try and find simplification to facilitate the work of our stakeholders and make sure that we are truly helping them to get their projects on the ground and eventually delivering what they promised to do. Obviously, as you know, and it was said by several speakers before, these projects are not easy to set up. They are prone to have delays and legal complexity. Suffice it to name the permits. Those permits to roll out submarine cables on the shores or in each and every country crossing territorial waters and so on and so forth are not easy to get, so they are often a source of delay. And those consortia also are living bodies, so some partners sometimes drop out or come in. So we are handling all this complexity. and in the most efficient possible way that we can, according to the rules on sound financial management and in respect of our KPIs, of course. Now, we're also considering, for instance, lump sum, but that might be for the future because it is not a simple thing to do. But as far as large infrastructures are concerned, it might be an interesting use case to try and use more lump sums also for this in the future. But this is, I would say, preparatory steps to the next MFF period.
That's great. Thank you very much, Hervé. And with this, we will move to the closing remarks by Alexandra Rotilianu. Alexandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Raquel, and good afternoon to all. I hope you have enjoyed the session as much as I have. It was dense, it was packed with information. So the purpose was not really to overload you with information, but really to share some key insights on the bulk of our work on backbones and especially on submarine cable here in the GConnect. You will bear with me, first of all, when I go through a little bit the main ideas of the sessions, because this is called CNECT University, and my best friend, who is a university professor, is teaching me that I should repeat key messages 3 times to make sure that they pass. Now, I think what we tried above all is to share with you why backbones and why submarine cables especially are important, why we fund them, because it doesn't mean that if something is important, we necessarily need to put public money in it. What kind of submarine cables we would like to see deployed, or what kind of deployments we do ourselves. And then what do we do to make sure that these cables are secure and are resilient? Now, on why the backbones are important, I think Franco was extensively explaining that these are, first of all, about our commitments to the digital decade targets, to the connectivity targets. You cannot have 100% connectivity in all the islands unless you make sure that there's a cable going through that island. To give you an extreme example, but it's surely not the only one. I think both Franco and Miguel in their intervention explained also intensively why these backbone networks are really essential for our work on competitiveness and on security and resilience, which is mainly our Commission agenda nowadays. Now we cannot deliver the AI continent in a nutshell unless the digital backbones are in place, what Franco described as the backspine of the digital economy, no? On resilience, we already heard several examples on why these networks have become really critical infrastructure. So as the economy functions on them, as innovation depends on digital transformation, as public services are increasingly delivered on networks, they are in itself critical infrastructures, these networks. Now, moving to Julien's intervention, I think he had a very convincing explanation on why we need to put public money in it. No, there is what we typically do. We typically co-fund suboptimal market situations, meaning projects where the market players either they won't go at all or they will not go alone. So it means we need to put public money because, as he explained, among others, the market is not really profitable. The perspective of profits is a rather long-term one. And also we really try to crowd in and to steer public investments on some critical routes where we consider that we have to ensure European control, because that's another very interesting element which I took out of Julien's intervention, and that is that funding these networks is really a matter of ensuring that the digital transformation is sovereign, that we have sovereignty in the European Union. It's in a context where more and more of this market is dominated by the non-European content providers. We need to support these networks, these network providers, in order to maintain European control on certain routes that are important to make sure that Europe is cohesive, that there's single market, that Europe is connected to its main main partners, but of course also that all European territories are connected among themselves, no? Moving then to Georgia's intervention, I think we, of course, especially when we fund, but not only through funding, also often through other policy incentives than funding, we hope to see that the backbone networks and the submarine cables in particular fulfill certain criteria, of course, of quality, of security, but also in innovation. And a very important element of innovation is this element of smart cables. And I think, Georgios, you gave a very interesting and concise and convincing explanation why smart cables are not only about providing internet, no, but they can do so much more in terms of monitoring, in terms of detection, in terms of scientific research, in terms of environmental benefits. We then listened to a very rich, interesting, and truly dense presentation on security and resilience, which was fully justified because the title of our session is Security and Resilience of Backbone Networks. This is indeed a very important and central theme of our work. I think if I have to summarize it in really just one phrase, I would say that it's what we do now is not only nowadays more and more, is not only to make sure that we see deployments and that we see redundant deployments in key areas on key routes, which is in itself an important element of ensuring resilience, but also that we go beyond the deployment, no? So a lot of this work refers to assessing risks, to understanding where the risks are, where the vulnerabilities are, and to go beyond deployment. So to be able to monitor, to prevent, to repair if something happens, to deter, that it will not happen again. I think once those presentations were done, in a nutshell, that contains the vision that is behind our work on submarine cables. That is, on the one hand, policy work, regulatory work. You heard about the recommendations, the action plan. And also, of course, there is a very important funding work, and Miguel referred to that, and Hervé explained that at length, how we work with CEF, which is the main funding instrument for submarine cables in the EU, how the applications go, how we select our projects. And that actually brings me to my own part of the intervention, and that is a little bit what's next. So we hinted already through several speakers that there will be further CEF calls. So there remains in the coming years, 2006, 2007, funding from CEF for the submarine cables, for the backbones. And of course, there will be, we have already on the table, you may or may not know, the MFF proposal, the new MFF proposals, and these are the proposals for the funding instruments as of 2028. Now, what you will see, that there is no CEF Digital. Of course, there is a change, but the good news of it is that there is the Competitiveness Fund instead, which among others will fund submarine cables and backbone networks. So a lot of the CEF work will be continued under the Competitiveness Fund. There are, I would say, important opportunities brought by the Competitiveness Fund. To start with, at least at the level of the Commission proposal, you know, of course, that it has to be agreed with the co-legislator, but at least right now, we propose to dedicate 5 times more funding for digital, not for submarine cables, for digital, including submarine cables. That in itself is an opportunity. Then there is the opportunity of really much larger, what we call eligibility or scope of intervention. So we have much more flexibility in terms of what can be done, how we craft intervention, and also how exactly we implement it. So the toolbox, there was a question on simplification. So there is significant potential for simplification with this Competitiveness Fund. there would be a lot of details, but I think it's not the place, it's not necessary to go into them. I would say that with the Competitiveness Fund, we have indeed the opportunity to craft interventions that are much more coherent, let's say from A to Z, to really ensure policy traction. So a lot of possibilities, but on the other hand, no funding dedicated to any priority. That's a little bit the price that you need to pay when you have more flexibility. What does it mean? Also, by the way, the funding needs have increased. And I think, again, Julien made a very compelling argument that there's a lot of funding needs also in our area, as well as in many other digital areas. So, of course, what it means is prioritization. And I would like to refer to two exercises to just give you an idea of how we go about this prioritization of investments. And one already was mentioned by Miguel, no? You have heard, if you were paying good attention, you have heard about the work of the submarine expert group done with the member states, and that group is delivering a list and criteria for cable projects of European interest. So that is an exercise. We're building on a number of technical criteria and on technical expertise. We try to reach a consensus among the member states as much as possible on what are the most important projects, cable projects of European interest. And then this will not stop here, no? So this is a list that will be delivered very shortly. It will guide our work in the remaining years with CEF Digital. It's probably a very good start to start prioritizing for the funding the next MFF. And then there may be a further exercise, and that is called the Trans-European Networks Digital, and for which we have been asked by the Council in its conclusions of June of this year to perhaps consider a more broad, a more holistic approach to the security, resilience, and redundancy of networks. So to really think broader, when one technology fails, that we not necessarily have only another submarine cable route, maybe there's a terrestrial route. When that fails, that there is a satellite connection. So I think that also feeds into the exercise of really discussing with stakeholders, discussing with the member states, to make sure that we come to a common understanding of what kind of funding for backbone networks should be prepared for the next MFF. Now, I think I could go on and on, but in view and timing, I would better pass back to our host, Rachele, and see if there's any questions. Thank you.
Well, unless otherwise, yeah, I don't see any questions. Thank you so much, Alexandra, for closing the session very precisely, coming back on the points mentioned today. So if you haven't followed the whole session, this was a very good recap of everything that was said. So since there are no further questions, it is time to close this session and to thank everyone involved as usual. So the speakers, the technical team that you don't see, but that helps us a lot. And last but not least, the audience. Thank you very much. It is always appreciated to have such a rich exchange. I grabbed the occasion to remind you that the recording will stay on the Digital EU YouTube channel and that the slides will stay on the Futurum platform. So if you missed a part of this session or if you want to watch it again, you can. Links have been added in the chat. With this session, we also close officially the CNECT University Autumn School of this week. You are, of course, invited to join us again next year, so for the next edition. And in the meantime, we will be on the lookout for new interesting themes and topics. Have a very nice afternoon, and until next time. Thank you.
From Brussels to Brasilia, from San Francisco to Tokyo, the European Commission is shaping the digital future, not just at home, but across the globe. Join us as we navigate the digital diplomacy of tomorrow, because everything we do is part of something bigger.